Now let's begin. Keith Harrison pulled his Ford pickup into the driveway of the modest split-level house on Riverside Drive, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the overgrown lawn. His mother-in-law had never been great at maintenance, but lately the place looked worse than usual. The paint was peeling, shutters hung crooked, and newspapers piled up on the porch. He'd been meaning to talk to Sophia about it, but his wife always defended her mother with the same line. She's doing her best since Dad died. He checked his watch. 4:30. Right on time to pick up Emma and Tyler from their weekly overnight with Grandma Marcia. The twins loved these visits, though Keith had started noticing things that bothered him. Tyler had come home with a bruise on his arm last month. Emma had been unusually quiet after the visit before that. When he'd mentioned it to Sophia, she'd waved it off. Kids get bruises. And Emma's 4. She has moods. Keith climbed out of the truck, his boots crunching on the gravel. He was 38, broad-shouldered with close-cropped dark hair, and the kind of presence that made people instinctively straighten up when he entered a room. 12 years in military intelligence had given him that effect. He wasn't imposing through intimidation, but through an intensity in his gray eyes that suggested he saw more than most people wanted to reveal. The front door was ajar. That was the first wrong thing. Keith's hand instinctively moved toward his hip where he used to carry his service weapon, though he'd been civilian for 3 years now. Old habits. He pushed the door open slowly. Emma? Tyler. His daughter appeared in the hallway, her small face streaked with tears. Her princess dress was torn at the shoulder, and she clutched her stuffed rabbit so tightly her knuckles were white. Keith was on his knees in an instant. Emma, sweetheart, what's wrong? Where's your brother? Emma's bottom lip trembled. She opened her mouth, but only a sob came out. Emma. Keith's voice was gentle but firm. Where's Tyler? Footsteps approached from deeper in the house. Marcia Ramsey emerged from the kitchen, and Keith's trained eye caught everything wrong in a single sweep. The woman's face was pale and blotchy, her hands shaking, her eyes red-rimmed but dry now. She'd cried herself out already. She was wearing the same clothes she'd had on yesterday when he dropped off the kids. A wine bottle was visible on the kitchen counter behind her, empty. Keith. Her voice cracked. We need to talk. Please. Promise me you won't get mad. Keith stood slowly, his jaw tightening. He kept his voice level. Where is my son, Marcia? Please, just promise me. Where is Tyler? The boom of his voice made Emma cry harder. Keith forced himself to breathe, to think like he'd been trained. Control the situation. Assess. Adapt. He picked up Emma and held her against his chest, her tears soaking into his shirt. His eyes never left Marcia's face. You have 5 seconds to tell me where my son is, or I'm calling the police, and then I'm tearing this house apart. Marcia's composure crumbled. She sank into the worn armchair by the door, her hands covering her face. He's gone. Tyler's gone. I'm so sorry, Keith. I'm so sorry. The world seemed to tilt. Keith's grip on Emma tightened protectively. Gone? What does that mean, gone? Did someone take him? Did he wander off? Marcia, talk to me. It was Waldo, she whispered. My boyfriend. You never met him. Sophia doesn't know about him. He convinced me it would be better. He said one child was enough, that raising twins at my age was too much, that Sophia, and you couldn't really afford 2 kids anyway with your mortgage and… Stop. Keith's voice was ice. Are you telling me you let someone take my son? Marcia looked up, mascara tracking down her cheeks. He said it was a good family. Someone who really wanted a boy. Someone who could give him things. Waldo has this friend, Ramon, and Ramon's been trying to adopt for years, but he has some problems in his background, so… Keith crossed the room in 3 strides. He didn't touch her, but he loomed over the chair, and Marcia pressed herself back into the cushions. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but Emma would later tell her therapist it was the scariest sound she'd ever heard. You sold my son. No, it wasn't like that. There was no money. Waldo just said, you gave my 4-year-old boy to a criminal who can't legally adopt, and you let him take Tyler away. When? This morning. Around 10. Waldo picked him up. He said Ramon had already prepared a room, had toys and everything. He said Tyler would love it. He said. Keith pulled out his phone and dialed. Emma was still crying against his shoulder, but quieter now, her small hand gripping his collar. The phone rang once. Sophia, come to your mother's house right now. Don't ask questions. Just come. Yes, right now. Emma's fine. She's with me. He paused. Tyler's gone. I'll explain when you get here. 20 minutes. Hurry. He ended the call and looked back at Marcia. You're going to tell me everything. Every single detail. Waldo's full name. Where he lives. His phone number. Ramon's information. What Tyler was wearing. Everything you remember about this morning. And then you're going to pray that I find my son before I decide what to do about you. Marcia nodded miserably. Waldo Buckley. His name is Waldo Buckley. He lives over on Industrial Street, in those apartments by the old mill. Number 2B. Keith, he's not a good person. I know that now. I don't know what I was thinking. I've been so lonely since Sophia's father died, and Waldo was charming, and he brought wine, and I wasn't thinking clearly. His phone number. She recited it. Keith memorized it instantly. Ramon's last name. Stafford. Ramon Stafford. I only met him once, about 2 months ago. Waldo brought him here for dinner. He seemed nice, just quiet. He works at some warehouse, I think. Waldo said he lives up north, maybe 45 minutes from here. Somewhere rural. What was Tyler wearing? His blue jeans and the red t-shirt with the dinosaur. His light-up sneakers. He had his backpack with his stuffed lion inside. Keith was making mental notes of everything, his mind already working through the possibilities. 6 hours. Tyler had been gone for 6 hours. A 4-year-old who'd just been taken from his grandmother by a stranger, even if Marcia had tried to make it seem okay. The trauma Tyler must be experiencing right now made Keith's chest tight with rage, but he forced it down. Emotion was the enemy of effective action. Did Waldo say anything else about Ramon? Where exactly he lives? His job? Anything. Marcia was crying again, desperately trying to remember. He said Ramon had served time. That's why he couldn't adopt legally. Something about assault, maybe? And he mentioned Ramon had a place on some acreage, that he raised chickens or something. That it would be good for a boy to grow up in the country. The front door burst open. Sophia Harrison rushed in, her nurse's scrubs still on from her shift. She was 35, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, and her face was a mask of terror. Keith? What's happening? Where's Tyler? Keith turned to her, still holding Emma. Your mother let her boyfriend take our son. For a moment, Sophia just stared. Then she looked at her mother, and Keith watched his wife's expression cycle through disbelief, confusion, horror, and finally a cold fury he'd only seen once before, when a drunk driver had nearly hit their car with the twins inside. Mom. Her voice was dangerously quiet. Tell me that's not true. Marcia started explaining again, the words tumbling out, and Keith watched Sophia's face harden with each sentence. When Marcia finished, Sophia turned to Keith. What do we do? Keith set Emma down gently on the couch, kneeling to look into her eyes. Emma, sweetheart, I need you to be brave. Can you do that? Can you sit right here while Mommy and I talk to Grandma? Emma nodded, still clutching her rabbit. Keith stood and pulled out his phone again, but this time he didn't dial. First, we find Tyler. We're not calling the police yet. What? Keith, we have to. Think about it, Sophia. Your mother voluntarily gave our son to someone. She'll say she thought it was a temporary arrangement, or she was confused, or whatever. Waldo and Ramon will claim it was all a misunderstanding. Tyler's been gone 6 hours. By the time police process all of this, file reports, get warrants if they even can, it'll be tomorrow. Or longer. And these guys will know we're coming. Sophia's medical training made her practical. So what's your plan? Keith looked at Marcia. You're going to call Waldo right now? You're going to tell him you're worried, that you want to see how Tyler's settling in. You're going to ask if you can come visit. You're going to be sweet and concerned, nothing more. Can you do that? Marcia nodded frantically. Yes, I can do that. And you're going to put it on speakerphone. If you warn him in any way, if you say anything other than what I just told you, I will make sure you never see Emma again, and I will make sure Sophia knows exactly what kind of mother you are. Am I clear? Keith, Sophia started. Am I clear, Marcia? Yes, Marcia whispered. Keith handed her his phone with Waldo's number already entered. Call. Marcia's hands shook as she pressed dial and put it on speaker. It rang 4 times before a gravelly voice answered. Yeah. Waldo, honey, it's Marcia. What's up, babe? I'm kinda busy right now. I was wondering how the little guy's doing. Is he settling in okay at Ramon's? There was a pause. Keith's eyes narrowed. When Waldo spoke again, his tone was different. Suspicious. He's fine. Why? You having second thoughts? We talked about this, Marcia. You said you understood. I know. I just worry, that's all. You know me. I'm a worrier. I thought maybe I could drive up this weekend, just to see him, make sure he's happy. No. The word was flat. Ramon doesn't want that. You said you could handle this. Was that a lie? No. Of course not. Then trust the process. The kid's better off. He's got space to run around, toys, all that shit. More than what you had here. More than what his parents could give him working all the time. You did the right thing, Marcia. Don't make me regret trusting you. The implied threat was clear. Keith's jaw clenched. Marcia's voice was small. Okay, you're right. I'm sorry. Good girl. I'll call you later. And Marcia, don't call me again about this. We're done with that subject. The line went dead. Sophia's face was white. He threatened her. He's threatened her before, hasn't he, Mom? Marcia couldn't meet her daughter's eyes. Keith took his phone back. Doesn't matter now. What matters is finding Tyler. He looked at Marcia one more time. Is there anything else? Anything you saw or heard that might tell us where Ramon lives? Marcia thought hard. When Ramon was here for dinner, Waldo joked about how far out Ramon lived. He said something like 40 miles to the nearest grocery store, and Ramon laughed and said it was more like 30 if you took the county roads. And Ramon had mud on his boots. Red mud. I remember because it stained my carpet and I couldn't get it out. Red clay soil. Rural area. 30 to 45 minutes north. Enough land for chickens. Ex-con named Ramon Stafford. Keith was already moving toward the door. Sophia, take Emma home. Stay there and wait for my call. Don't call the police yet. Give me 12 hours. Keith, this is crazy. Let the police handle it. He turned back to her, and she saw something in his eyes that reminded her of the man she'd met 12 years ago. The one who'd come back from overseas deployments with shadows in his gaze and a way of going completely still that made her nervous. She'd thought civilian life had softened those edges. She'd been wrong. The police will take too long and ask too many questions. I'll have Tyler back before midnight. Trust me. Sophia wanted to argue, but she looked at her daughter sitting shell-shocked on the couch, and she thought about her son somewhere out there, confused and scared, and she nodded. 12 hours. Then I'm calling everyone. Keith kissed her forehead. I'll bring him home. He walked out without another word to Marcia. As he climbed into his truck, he was already making calls. The first was to Danielle Dyer, a private investigator he'd worked with during his last year in the service. Danielle had gone civilian a year before Keith, and now ran a small operation out of an office downtown. More importantly, he had access to databases that civilians weren't supposed to touch. Dyer. Danny, it's Keith Harrison. I need a favor, and I need it fast. Keith. Long time. What's going on? I need you to run a name for me. Ramon Stafford. Has a record, probably assault. Looking for a current address, particularly anything rural with acreage, within 45 minutes north of the city. Red clay soil in the area. I need this in the next hour. Jesus, Keith. That's specific. What's this about? Someone took my son. I'm getting him back. There was a pause. Say no more. Give me 45 minutes. Keith's next call was to another old contact, someone who owed him a favor from his intelligence days. King Williamson answered on the first ring. Harrison, didn't expect to hear from you. I need to know everything about a guy named Waldo Buckley. Lives at 2B, Industrial Street Apartments. I need his full background, his associates, his routine, everything you can dig up. When? Yesterday. King whistled. That urgent, huh? Give me a couple hours. 1 hour, King. This is my son. Shit. Okay. 1 hour. Keith ended the call and started driving. Not home. Not yet. He had a stop to make first. 20 minutes later, he was pulling up to a storage unit facility on the outskirts of town. He kept Unit 247 under his own name, something Sophia didn't know about. Inside were items from his previous life, items he'd told himself he'd never need again. He unlocked the unit and pulled up the rolling door. Inside were boxes, a few pieces of furniture, and in the back corner, a locked steel case. Keith opened it with a key from his truck's glove box. Inside the case was his old gear, tactical vest, night vision goggles, zip ties, a combat knife, and other tools of his former trade. And beneath it all, wrapped in oiled cloth, was his personal sidearm, a Sig Sauer P226 that had been with him through 3 deployments. Keith checked the weapon, loaded it, and tucked it into his waistband under his jacket. He wasn't planning to use it, But he'd learned long ago that having options was what separated survivors from casualties. His phone buzzed. "Danielle, I've got 3 possibilities for Ramon Stafford. One's been locked up for the past 2 years, so scratch that. Another one lives in the city in a condo, also no good. But the third one is interesting. Ramon Stafford, age 42, did 18 months for aggravated assault 5 years ago. Got out, moved to a property up in Fairfield County. 12 acres, no close neighbors. County records show it as agricultural. He's registered as raising poultry. Matches your description. Address: 458 Old Mill Road, Fairfield County. It's about 45 minutes northeast. The road's unpaved for the last 3 miles. Isolated as hell. Send me the GPS coordinates." "Already did." "Keith, you want backup on this?" "No, but keep your phone on. If you don't hear from me by midnight, call the police and give them everything. Be careful, man." Keith hung up and checked his watch. 7:15. Tyler had been gone for 9 hours. He climbed back into his truck and entered the coordinates into his GPS. As he drove, his phone rang again. King Williamson. Waldo Buckley is a piece of work. 2 convictions for drug trafficking, 1 for assault with a deadly weapon. Did 8 years total. Been out for 3 years. Known associates include several other convicted felons. The interesting part? He's got a cousin who works for Child Protective Services. That's probably how he knew the system well enough to avoid it. Go on. He's been seeing your mother-in-law for about 6 months. Looks like he targeted her. She's got a decent pension from her late husband. Waldo's been making withdrawals from her accounts. Small amounts, but it adds up. He's bleeding her dry slowly. Keith's grip tightened on the steering wheel. What else? Ramon Stafford is one of his old cellmates from his first stint. They've been linked to some questionable activities since they both got out, but nothing that stuck. Rumor is they've been involved in some kind of off-the-books placement service, basically connecting felons who want kids with desperate or compromised parents willing to give them up. Your son probably isn't the first. Jesus. Yeah. Listen, Keith, this is bigger than just your kid. If you're going after these guys, you're walking into something that could blow back on you. My advice? Call the FBI. They have a task force that handles this kind of thing. And watch the case get tangled in bureaucracy for weeks while Tyler's traumatized? No thanks. I'll handle it my way. I figured you'd say that. Just be smart about it. These aren't amateurs. Neither am I. Keith ended the call and focused on the road. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He drove north, the city giving way to suburbs, then to rural countryside. The GPS showed him getting closer to Old Mill Road. He thought about Tyler. His son was probably terrified right now, calling for mom and dad, wondering why nobody was coming. Or maybe Ramon had fed him some story about it being a game, about surprising his parents later. Maybe Tyler still thought Grandma was coming back for him. The rage that Keith had been keeping carefully controlled began to simmer. He'd spent years learning to manage it, to channel it into productive action. The military had taught him that emotion made you sloppy, that cold calculation won firefights. But they'd also taught him that controlled aggression, properly focused, was a weapon in itself. He turned onto Old Mill Road as the last light faded from the sky. The pavement ended after a mile, becoming dirt and gravel. Keith killed his headlights and slowed down, using the GPS and his night vision to navigate. He didn't want to announce his arrival. 3 miles in, he saw it. A farmhouse set back from the road, lights glowing in the windows. A rusted pickup truck sat in the driveway next to a newer sedan. Chicken coops were visible behind the house, and beyond that, dark fields stretched toward a tree line. Keith parked his truck a quarter-mile back and approached on foot, moving through the scrub brush parallel to the road. His military training came back instantly. How to move silently, how to use terrain, how to observe without being seen. He circled around to the back of the property, staying low. Through a lit window, he could see into what looked like a living room. A man sat on a couch, bulky, bald, late 30s or early 40s. Ramon Stafford, presumably. He was watching TV, a beer in his hand. Keith scanned the rest of the house from his vantage point. Another window showed a kitchen, empty. A third window. His heart stopped. Tyler. His son was in what looked like a bedroom, sitting on a small bed, still wearing his dinosaur shirt. He was holding his stuffed lion, and even from outside, Keith could see that his face was blotchy from crying. But he was alive. He was whole. He was there. Keith had to physically restrain himself from going through the window right then, but he forced himself to think. Going in hot would put Tyler at risk. He needed to be smart about this. He pulled back and circled the property again, counting windows, noting doors. The house was old, probably built in the 70s. 2 entrances, front and back. The back door looked like it had a simple deadbolt. There was a storm door on the front, probably locked from inside. No other vehicles were visible, which meant Ramon was likely alone. But Keith needed to be sure. He took out his phone and called the house. He'd gotten the number from Danielle. It was listed under Ramon's name. Inside, he saw Ramon look surprised, then get up and walk to the kitchen where a wall phone hung. He picked it up. Yeah. Keith disguised his voice, making it rougher. Ramon Stafford? Who's this? Name's Cooper. I got your number from Waldo. Here you might be able to help me with a situation. Ramon's voice became cautious. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. Waldo said you helped him out recently. Said you've got a setup that works well. I've got a similar situation, messy divorce, ex-wife's making threats, and I've got a daughter I need to protect. Waldo said you could help. There was a long pause. Waldo shouldn't have given you this number. He didn't. I convinced him to share it. Look, I can make it worth your time. I'm just looking for information right now. Maybe we could meet, talk it over. I'm not far from Fairfield County. Tomorrow morning work? No. And don't call this number again. Ramon hung up. Keith smiled grimly. The call had served its purpose. He'd confirmed Ramon was alone, and he'd rattled him. Ramon would probably call Waldo now, which was fine. Keith wanted them nervous. He moved to the back door and examined the lock. Simple, like he'd thought. He pulled out a small kit from his pocket. Lockpicking tools he'd kept from his intelligence days. 30 seconds later, the deadbolt clicked open. Keith drew his weapon and entered the house silently. The kitchen was to his right, empty. The living room was straight ahead. He could hear the TV playing, some sports broadcast. He moved through the kitchen, placing his feet carefully to avoid creaking boards. Ramon was still on the couch, his back to Keith. His phone was in his hand. He was texting someone, probably Waldo. Keith crossed the living room in 4 quick steps and pressed the barrel of his gun against the back of Ramon's head. Don't move. Don't speak. Not if you understand. Ramon froze, then nodded slowly. Put the phone down on the couch beside you. Slowly. Ramon complied. Now stand up. Keep your hands where I can see them. Ramon stood, his hands rising. He was bigger than Keith had expected, maybe 6'2" and heavy with muscle running to fat. But size didn't matter when you were the one with the gun. Keith stepped back, keeping the weapon trained on him. Turn around. Ramon turned. His face was flushed, eyes wide. Who the fuck are you? I'm the father of the boy you've got in your spare bedroom. We're going to walk down that hallway. You're going to open the door, and then you're going to stand very still while I get my son. If you do anything I don't like, I'll put a bullet in your knee, then the other knee. Then we'll have a much longer, much more painful conversation. Clear? Listen, man, I don't know what Waldo told you, but this was all legit. The grandmother signed papers. She gave permission. I've got documentation. Move. Keith gestured toward the hallway with the gun. Ramon walked slowly, Keith following. They reached the bedroom door. Keith could hear Tyler crying softly inside. Open it. Ramon opened the door. Tyler looked up from the bed, his eyes widening when he saw his father. Daddy. Hey, buddy. It's okay. Daddy's here. Keith kept his eyes and gun on Ramon. Tyler, I need you to come here to me. Can you do that? Tyler scrambled off the bed and ran to Keith, wrapping his arms around his father's leg. Keith reached down and scooped him up with his free arm, holding him tight. Tyler buried his face in Keith's shoulder, sobbing. It's okay, champ. You're safe now. I've got you. Keith backed toward the hallway, keeping Ramon in his sights. Where's your phone? Living room. Where I dropped it. Any other phones in the house? Tablet? Laptop? Laptop in the bedroom. Down the hall. Show me. Slowly. They walked to the master bedroom. Keith kept Tyler held against him with his left arm, the gun in his right hand never wavering. Ramon pointed to a laptop on a desk. Keith gestured toward it. Is it password protected? Yeah. Unlock it. Ramon sat at the desk and typed in a password. The screen lit up, showing a desktop wallpaper of a mountain landscape. Keith scanned the icons. Several folders were labeled with initials and dates. His jaw tightened. How many? He asked quietly. What? How many children have you and Waldo done this to? Ramon didn't answer. Keith raised the gun slightly. I asked you a question. 7. Ramon said finally. Including your kid. But it's not what you think. These were all situations where the kids were better off. Parents who couldn't handle them. Families that were struggling. We gave these kids better homes. You trafficked children from desperate families and gave them to people who couldn't legally adopt because they're criminals. Don't dress it up. Ramon's face darkened. Fuck you. You don't know anything. Some of those kids were being neglected, abused even. At least with my people, they get food, shelter, attention. Keith felt Tyler trembling against him. He lowered his voice, making it colder. You took my son from his grandmother's house 6 hours ago. He's 4 years old. He's been crying for his parents all day. Does that sound like someone who needed to be saved? Waldo said the grandmother was barely keeping it together. Said she'd been drinking, forgetting to feed them. He said, Waldo's a liar who manipulates lonely women and steals their money. And you're a child trafficker. There's no version of this where you're the hero. Keith grabbed a USB drive from the desk and tossed it to Ramon. Copy everything from those folders onto that. Every file. Every name. Every address. Man, you don't want to do that. Some of those people are seriously dangerous. If they find out you've got their information, copy the files. Ramon flinched and started copying files. It took several minutes. When he was done, Keith had him put the drive on the floor and kick it over. Keith pocketed it, still holding Tyler. Now we're going to walk outside. You're going to sit in your truck and you're not going to move until I'm gone. If you follow me, I'll call every cop in the state and hand them this drive with your information on it. If you warn Waldo, same thing. If you even think about coming after my family, I'll come back here and finish what I started. And next time, I won't be this patient. Are we clear? Ramon nodded, his face pale now. They walked outside. Keith made Ramon sit in the truck with his hands on the steering wheel where Keith could see them. Then Keith backed toward his own truck, parked down the road, never taking his eyes off Ramon until he was out of sight around a bend. He holstered his weapon and hugged Tyler tight with both arms. You're okay, buddy. You're safe. We're going home to Mommy and Emma. Daddy, I was scared, Tyler sobbed. That man said Grandma wanted me to stay with him, but I wanted to come home. I wanted you and Mommy. I know, champ. I know. Grandma made a mistake. A really big mistake. But you're safe now. I promise nothing like this will ever happen again. Keith strapped Tyler into the passenger seat and drove fast, checking his mirror constantly to make sure Ramon wasn't following. He called Sophia. I've got him. He's safe. We're coming home. Sophia's relieved cry echoed through the phone. Thank God. Thank God. Is he hurt? No. Scared, but not hurt. We'll be there in 30 minutes. He drove through the night, Tyler eventually falling asleep in the passenger seat, exhausted from crying. Keith's mind was already working on the next phase. Ramon and Waldo had committed multiple felonies. The USB drive had evidence of a child trafficking operation. But if Keith just handed it to the police, there would be questions about how he obtained it. Questions about breaking into Ramon's house. Questions about threatening him at gunpoint. And there was something else bothering him. What Waldo had said on the phone. Don't make me regret trusting you. He'd threatened Marcia, which meant this wasn't over. Even if Ramon was scared off, Waldo was still out there. And Waldo knew where Sophia and the kids lived. No, this needed to be finished properly. Not just getting Tyler back, but making sure these men could never do this again. To anyone. Keith pulled into his driveway at 9:40. Sophia rushed out of the house before he'd even shut off the engine. She pulled Tyler out of the truck and held him, crying and laughing at the same time. Emma came running from the house, and soon all four of them were holding each other in the driveway under the porch light. Never again, Sophia said fiercely, looking at Keith over Tyler's head. Never, ever again. Never again, Keith agreed. I promise. But even as he said it, he was thinking about Waldo Buckley and the USB drive in his pocket and all the pieces of a plan that were starting to come together in his mind. After the reunion, after Tyler was bathed and fed and put to bed in his own room with Emma sleeping in the next room over, Keith sat at the kitchen table with Sophia. She'd made coffee, though neither of them really wanted it. They just needed something to do with their hands. Tell me everything, she said. So he did. He told her about tracking Ramon down, about entering the house, about the files on the laptop. He showed her the USB drive. There are 6 other families on here, he said quietly. 6 other children who were taken. Names, addresses, dates. This is bigger than just Tyler. Sophia's face hardened. Then we go to the police now. Tonight, we give them everything. And they'll arrest Ramon and probably Waldo. Eventually. But the legal process will take months, maybe years. And in the meantime, the people who have those other 6 kids will be warned. They'll disappear, change names, move. Those children will be lost in the system forever. So what are you saying? Keith leaned forward. I'm saying we need to be smart about this. I'm saying I need to finish what I started before involving the authorities. I need to make sure not only that Ramon and Waldo can never do this again, but that those 6 other children get back to their families. And I need to do it in a way that doesn't blow back on us. Sophia stared at him. Keith, you're scaring me. What exactly are you planning? Something that will work. But I need you to trust me, like you did tonight. She was quiet for a long moment, her coffee getting cold in front of her. Finally, she nodded. 3 days. You have 3 days to do whatever you're planning. Then we go to the police with everything, no matter what. Deal. Deal. They went to bed, but Keith didn't sleep. He lay in the dark, listening to Sophia's breathing next to him, and thought about the next moves. Waldo was the key. Ramon was a follower, someone who could be pressured. But Waldo was the architect. He was the one with the connections, the one who'd built this whole operation. And he was the one who'd manipulated Marcia. Around 3 in the morning, Keith got up and went to his home office. He plugged the USB drive into his computer and started examining the files more carefully. Each folder represented a different child. Inside were names, dates, photos, and most damningly, handwritten notes about the placements. One file caught his eye. A boy named Marcus, age 6, placed 8 months ago with a couple in a neighboring county. According to the notes, the mother had been convinced to give up her son because she was facing eviction and her boyfriend was abusive. Waldo had presented it as a temporary solution that became permanent. The couple who took Marcus had a history of domestic violence and couldn't pass a standard background check. Keith felt sick, but he also felt something else, a cold, focused anger that he recognized from his military days. This was the kind of anger that didn't explode in rage. It calculated. It planned. It executed. He spent the rest of the night compiling the information from the drive, cross-referencing names with online databases, building profiles of everyone involved. By the time Sophia came downstairs at 6, he had a list of 12 people directly implicated in the trafficking ring. Waldo and Ramon, for other recipients, and 6 facilitators, people like Marcia who'd been convinced or manipulated into giving up children. I need to go out today, he told Sophia over breakfast. The kids were still asleep. I need to set some things in motion. What things? The less you know right now, the better. If this goes wrong and police start asking questions, I want you to be able to honestly say you don't know details. Sophia didn't like it, but she understood. Be careful. And Keith, whatever you're planning, make sure it's worth the risk. We just got Tyler back. I can't lose you too. You won't. I promise. Keith's first stop was to see Danielle Dyer. He walked into the investigator's office at 8:30 sharp, carrying a duffel bag. Danielle looked up from his computer and whistled when he saw Keith's face. You look like you haven't slept. I haven't. Listen, I need your help with something off the books. How far off the books? Way off. Possibly illegal. Definitely messy. Danielle leaned back in his chair. Tell me. Keith explained the situation, showed him the files from the USB drive. Danielle's expression grew darker as he read through the documents. Jesus Christ. This is an FBI case waiting to happen. That's the problem. If we go to the FBI now, it'll take months to build a case. The kids will be moved, evidence will disappear, and we'll be lucky if they get half these people. I want all of them. Now, what do you need from me? I need verified addresses for all 12 people on this list. Current locations, routines, security situations. And I need it by tomorrow. That's a tall order. Can you do it? Danielle studied the list. Most of this I can get through regular channels. A few of these guys, I'll need to do some field work. What are you planning once you have the addresses? Better you don't know yet. Keith, if you're planning what I think you're planning. I'm not planning to kill anyone, if that's what you're worried about. But I am planning to make sure these people face consequences. Real consequences. The kind that stick. Danielle thought for a long moment, then nodded. All right, I'll have what you need by tomorrow afternoon. But Keith, don't do anything stupid. You've got a family to think about. That's exactly why I'm doing this. Keith's next stop was more delicate. He drove to the Industrial Street Apartments and parked across from Building 2. Waldo's building. He sat and watched for 2 hours, learning the comings and goings. Waldo's car, a beat-up Chevy Impala, was parked in Space 2B. The curtains in the apartment window were drawn, but occasionally Keith saw movement behind them. At 11, Waldo emerged. He was tall and rangy, with greasy black hair pulled into a ponytail and a face that looked like it had been broken a few times. He wore a leather jacket despite the warm weather and had the coiled alertness of someone who'd spent time in prison. Keith followed him at a distance as Waldo drove to a package store, bought cigarettes and lottery tickets, then drove to a diner on the south side. Waldo went inside and met with another man, Hispanic, 30s, wearing work clothes. They talked for 20 minutes over coffee. Money changed hands under the table. Keith took photos with his phone. Then he called King Williamson again. "I need you to run another name for me." Hispanic male, approximately 35 years old, meeting with Waldo Buckley at Lucy's Diner on Maple Street. "See if you can identify him from the surveillance camera footage outside. I'll send you the timestamp." "You're really going after these guys, aren't you?" "Yes. Just be careful. Waldo's got connections. Piss off the wrong people, and it could come back on you hard." "Let me worry about that." Keith spent the rest of the day shadowing Waldo, learning his routine. By evening, he had a clear picture of Waldo's operation. The man was running multiple scams. The child trafficking was just one piece. He was also dealing in prescription pills, running a small-scale identity theft operation, and taking a cut from several other criminals as a middleman. Waldo was a connector, someone who knew how to match needs with suppliers, all while staying just removed enough to avoid direct culpability. That was going to be his downfall. At 7 p.m., Keith called Marcia. She answered on the first ring. "Keith, how's Tyler?" "Is he?" "He's fine. No thanks to you. Listen to me carefully, Marcia. I need you to do exactly what I say, and I need you to not ask questions. Can you do that?" "Yes. God, yes. Anything. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., I need you to call Waldo and tell him you need to see him urgently. Tell him you're worried that Sophia and I might go to the police, that we're asking questions. Tell him you need to talk in person to figure out what to do. Can you be convincing?" I think so. You need to be. If he suspects something's wrong, this won't work. Tell him to meet you at your house. Tell him to come alone because you don't want anyone else to know about this conversation. Can you do that?" "Yes. But Keith, what are you?" "Don't ask. Just trust that this will make things right." "And Marcia? After tomorrow, you're never going to see Waldo again. Ever. If he calls you, you don't answer. If he shows up, you call the police." "Understood. Understood." Keith hung up and drove home. Sophia was waiting up for him. "How did it go?" "It's in motion. Tomorrow morning, everything comes together. And then we go to the police with evidence that will put Waldo and his whole network away for a very long time. But first, I need to make sure those 6 other children get home safely." Sophia held his hand. "You really think you can do this?" "I know I can. I've done harder things in worse situations with fewer resources. This is just about being smart and staying 3 steps ahead." That night, Keith finally slept. But it was the light sleep of a soldier before a mission, his mind already running through scenarios and contingencies. The next morning, at 9 a.m. sharp, Keith was parked 3 houses down from Marcia's place, watching through the truck's tinted windows. Right on schedule, Waldo's Impala pulled into the driveway. Waldo got out, looking irritated, and walked to the front door. Marcia let him in. Keith waited 5 minutes to make sure Waldo was settled, then he walked up to the house. He'd given Marcia instructions to leave the front door unlocked. He entered quietly. Voices came from the living room. Waldo's voice was sharp, angry. "Told you not to panic. Ramon said someone called him last night asking questions, and then some guy broke into his house with a gun. Was that your son-in-law? Did you tell him something?" "I didn't. I swear. Waldo, I didn't tell him anything he didn't already figure out. He just knew Tyler was with Ramon. I don't know how." "You're lying. You said you could keep your mouth shut. You said your family wouldn't." Keith stepped into the room. "She's telling the truth. She didn't tell me. I figured it out myself." Waldo spun around, his hand going to his jacket. Keith already had his gun drawn. "I wouldn't. Put your hands where I can see them." Waldo's eyes narrowed, but he raised his hands. "You're making a big mistake, friend. I'm not your friend. And the only mistake was yours, taking my son. That wasn't personal. That was business. The old lady here couldn't handle 2 kids. I did you a favor." Keith's face was stone. "Sit down." On the couch. Waldo sat slowly, his eyes never leaving Keith's face. Marcia was crying quietly in the corner chair. Keith pulled out his phone with his free hand and set it on the coffee table, starting a voice recording. Here's how this is going to work. You're going to tell me everything about your operation. Every child you've trafficked, every facilitator you've used, every recipient you've placed children with. Names, addresses, dates. Everything. Fuck you. Keith shot the lamp next to the couch. The sound was deafening in the small room. Marcia screamed. Waldo flinched hard, his hands going up higher. I'm not joking, Keith said calmly. The next one goes in your knee. After that, your other knee. After that, we'll see how much you value your other body parts. Now talk. Waldo's bravado cracked. Okay, Jesus. Look, man, I'll tell you whatever you want. Just don't shoot me. Start with the 6 other children. Who has them and where? Waldo started talking. It took 20 minutes, but by the end, Keith had every detail. The recipients ranged from career criminals to desperate people who'd paid Waldo for the children. One was even a sex offender, though Waldo swore he didn't know that at the time. A lie Keith didn't believe for a second. How much did you make from all this? Maybe 40 grand total, over the past 2 years. It's not like I'm getting rich. The people who take the kids, they pay something, and I split it with whoever facilitates. It's a service, man. Supply and demand. You're trafficking children. I'm helping families who can't cope. There's a difference. Keith wanted to shoot him just on principle. But that wasn't the plan. Instead, he pulled out the USB drive and held it up. I've got every file from Ramon's computer. Every transaction, every name, every photo. I've got enough evidence to put you away for 20 years minimum. Waldo's face went pale. What do you want? I want those 6 children back with their families. And I want you to help me make that happen. What? No way. Some of those people are dangerous. If I cross them. Keith shot the other lamp. I don't care about your problems. Here's the deal. You're going to contact each recipient today. You're going to tell them there's been a complication, that authorities are investigating, and they need to return the children immediately to their original families. You're going to make it clear that keeping the children will bring law enforcement down on everyone. And you're going to do this while I'm sitting right here listening. They'll kill me. Maybe. But if you don't do it, I'll kill you right now and just hand this evidence to the FBI. At least this way you have a chance. Waldo looked at Keith's eyes and saw the truth there. He slumped back on the couch. Okay, I'll do it. Keith handed him his phone. Start calling. For the next hour, Keith listened as Waldo made 6 phone calls. Some recipients were angry, some were scared, but all of them agreed when Waldo painted a picture of imminent police raids and trafficking charges. By noon, all 6 children were being returned to drop-off points where their original families would find them. When it was done, Keith had Waldo write out a confession, names, dates, amounts, everything. Waldo's hand shook as he wrote, but Keith kept the gun trained on him until the last word was on paper. Sign it. Waldo signed. Keith folded the confession and put it in his jacket. Then he looked at Marcia. You're going to give the police a statement about everything Waldo did. How he manipulated you. How he took Tyler. All of it. You're going to cooperate fully. If you do that, I'll make sure Sophia knows you were coerced. If you don't, I'll make sure she cuts you out of her life completely. Choose. I'll cooperate, Marcia whispered. I'm so sorry, Keith. I'm so sorry. Keith didn't acknowledge the apology. He turned back to Waldo. You're going to disappear. Today. Right now. You're going to leave this state and never come back. If I ever hear that you've contacted Marcia again, or if you try this operation anywhere else, I'll make sure this confession and this recording reach every law enforcement agency in the country. Your face will be on every watch list. You'll never be able to show your face without being arrested. Are we clear? Waldo nodded miserably. Good. Now get out of my sight. Waldo stood and practically ran for the door. Keith let him go. He knew Waldo would run. Men like him always did when cornered. And if he didn't, well, Keith had insurance. After Waldo left, Keith made one more call. This one was to Detective Ryan Reeves, a local cop he'd done a favor for a few years back. Ryan owed him. Ryan, it's Keith Harrison. I need you to meet me at an address. I've got evidence of a child trafficking operation, and I need it handled carefully. Jesus, Keith. What have you gotten into? Just meet me. I'll explain everything. An hour later, Detective Reeves was sitting in Marcia's living room, reading through Waldo's confession and listening to the recording on Keith's phone. His face grew progressively more serious. This is huge. Federal level huge. I know. But 6 children are being returned to their families as we speak. I've got addresses and times. Your department can coordinate with child services to recover them safely. And the perpetrators? Waldo's in the wind, but you've got his confession and enough evidence to issue warrants. Ramon Stafford is at 458 Old Mill Road. The others are all listed in the files. You can coordinate with FBI to make the arrests. Reeves looked at Keith suspiciously. How did you get all this information? Does it matter? You've got enough here to break up a trafficking ring and save 6 kids. Isn't that what matters? Reeves thought about it, then nodded slowly. I'll need statements from you and Mrs. Ramsey. You'll get them. But first, get those children home safely. That's the priority. Reeves agreed and left to coordinate with his department. Keith turned to Marcia one last time. You're going to get help. Therapy, counseling, whatever you need. And you're going to earn back Sophia's trust over time. But you'll never be alone with my children again. Ever. Do you understand? Marcia nodded through her tears. Keith left and drove home. When he arrived, Sophia was in the living room with Emma and Tyler, playing with blocks. She looked up when Keith entered, hope and fear mixed in her expression. It's done, Keith said. 6 other children are being returned to their families right now. Police are moving to arrest everyone involved. Waldo's gone. It's over. Sophia stood and crossed to him, wrapping her arms around him. You did it. We did it. You trusted me when it mattered. That evening, Detective Reeves called to confirm that all 6 children had been recovered safely. Parents who'd been told their children had died, or had been placed in foster care, or had simply vanished, were being reunited with them. Ramon Stafford had been arrested at his property. The other recipients were being rounded up. Warrants were being issued for Waldo, though he'd disappeared. You did a good thing here, Keith, Reeves said. Even if your methods were unorthodox. Sometimes unorthodox is what works. Just don't make a habit of it. Keith smiled grimly. No promises. The next few weeks were a blur of statements, follow-ups, and media coverage. The trafficking ring made regional news, though Keith kept his family's names out of it as much as possible. Marcia gave her statement to police and began seeing a therapist. Sophia maintained a cold but civil relationship with her mother, though she made it clear that rebuilding trust would take years. Tyler had nightmares for a while, but with therapy and the security of being home with his parents, he gradually recovered. Emma, who'd been traumatized by seeing her brother taken, also got counseling. The family grew closer through the ordeal, though Keith noticed Sophia watching him sometimes with a look he couldn't quite read, part gratitude, part wariness, as if she'd seen a side of him she hadn't fully known existed. 1 month after the incident, Keith got a call from King Williamson. Thought you'd want to know, Waldo Buckley was picked up 3 states over. Tried to run a similar scheme and got caught by an undercover FBI operation. With the evidence from your case, they're charging him with over a dozen federal crimes. He's looking at 25 to 30 years minimum. Keith felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Good. Ramon's already pleaded out. He's testifying against everyone in exchange for a reduced sentence. The whole network is crumbling. You really did something here, Keith. I just got my son back. You did more than that. You saved 7 kids and took down a trafficking operation. Not bad for a civilian. After the call, Keith went upstairs to check on the twins. They were asleep in their beds, Emma clutching her rabbit, Tyler with his stuffed lion. He stood in the doorway and watched them breathe, these 2 small lives that depended on him and Sophia. He thought about the man he'd been in the military, the one who'd learned to compartmentalize violence and necessity. He thought about the man he'd tried to become in civilian life, pushing those skills and instincts aside. And he thought about the man he was now, a father who'd do anything, cross any line, take any risk to protect his family. Sophia appeared beside him in the doorway, slipping her hand into his. You okay? She whispered. Yeah, just thinking. About what? About how lucky we are? And about how close we came to losing all this. Sophia squeezed his hand. But we didn't. You made sure of that. They stood together in the doorway, watching their children sleep, and Keith made a silent promise to himself. He'd never let his guard down again. He'd never trust blindly. And he'd never hesitate to do what needed to be done to keep his family safe. 3 months later, Keith received a letter. It was from one of the families whose child had been recovered, the mother of 6-year-old Marcus. She wrote about the hell of believing her son was in foster care somewhere, when he'd actually been trafficked. She wrote about the miracle of getting him back. And she wrote about how grateful she was to whoever had exposed the operation. Keith didn't respond to the letter. He kept it in his desk drawer, and sometimes when he doubted himself or his choices, he'd take it out and read it again. Life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be. Keith went back to his job as a consultant. Sophia continued her work at the hospital. The twins started pre-K, and Emma insisted on walking Tyler to his classroom every morning, as if to make sure he was really there. Marcia moved to another state to live near her sister, finally getting away from the memories and mistakes that had defined her last year. Before she left, she met with Sophia one last time. Keith wasn't there, but Sophia told him about it later. She apologized again, Sophia said. She's getting help. Real help this time. I told her I wasn't ready to forgive, but that may be someday. That's fair, Keith said. She asked me to tell you something. She said she understands now why I married you. She said she's grateful that Tyler has a father who would move heaven and earth for him. Keith didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. A year later, Keith was in the backyard pushing Tyler and Emma on the swing set when his phone rang. It was Detective Reeves. Keith, thought you'd want to know. The trial just wrapped up. Every single person involved in that trafficking ring got convicted. Thanks to your evidence and the testimony, we got them all. Some are looking at decades behind bars. Good. There's something else. The FBI wants to talk to you about consulting work. They're impressed with how you handled the investigation. They think your skill set could be useful for other cases. Keith watched his children laughing as they swung higher and higher. Tell them thanks, but no thanks. I've got everything I need right here. He ended the call and went back to pushing the swings, listening to his children's laughter and thinking about how close he'd come to losing this. How all of this, the backyard barbecues, the bedtime stories, the small precious moments that made up a life, could have been torn away by one terrible decision. But it hadn't been. He'd fought for his family, and he'd won. And that was enough. Years later, when Tyler was older and asked about that time he'd been taken, Keith would tell him a simplified version. He'd explain that sometimes bad people do bad things, but that good people fight back. That family means never giving up. That love means being willing to do hard things. What he wouldn't tell Tyler, what he'd never tell anyone, was the full extent of what he'd been willing to do. The lines he'd been prepared to cross. The violence he'd been ready to commit if necessary. But Sophia knew. She'd seen it in his eyes that night when he'd come back with Tyler. She'd seen the man beneath the civilian exterior, the soldier who'd never fully left the battlefield. And she'd never looked at him the same way again. Not with fear exactly, but with a deeper understanding of who she'd married. A man who could be gentle with his children and ruthless with his enemies. A man who could build a life of peace but wage war when needed. She'd asked him once, months after everything was over, if he regretted how he'd handled it. No, he'd said simply. I'd do it again. Exactly the same way. And she'd nodded, because she understood. In that moment, she'd needed him to be exactly who he was. And he had been. That was enough. That was everything. The Harrisons lived happily, vigilantly, gratefully. Keith never forgot the lesson of that terrible day. Trust had to be earned. Safety had to be maintained. And family had to be protected at all costs. He'd learned those lessons in the military, but he'd proven them at home. And in the end, that made all the difference. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.